Our film kicks off at a quiet U.S. military base. We meet Major Daniel and his colleagues as they start their day, just like any other. Their job is to monitor all movements in the areas under their control, but this quiet isn't going to last. Meanwhile, in another location, we see a woman named Olivia with her husband and son at home. We learn that Olivia works at the White House. Because of the nature of her job, she can't take her son to the doctor, so she asks her husband to take him and to keep her updated on how he's doing.
We go back to Major Daniel and his team, and suddenly, disaster strikes. They spot an intercontinental ballistic missile flying over the Pacific Ocean. The biggest problem? This missile is a total unknown. No one knows where it was launched from. At first, everyone thinks it's just a secret military test, especially because the early warning systems didn't activate or give any kind of danger warning.
At first, it's confusing. Is this a test? Or a potential attack? But unfortunately, they quickly discover this missile is a very real threat. They don't know if it was launched from land or sea, but its flight path is terrifyingly clear. A strike is coming to U.S. soil. And the target?
We then move to the Situation Room in the White House. We see Olivia arriving at her office, only to be shocked by the extremely tense atmosphere. It appears all the employees are tracking the missile launch with intense anxiety and tension. Olivia and her colleagues keep monitoring the potential threats. Their boss, Miller, tries to calm them down. He tells them the missile is probably just an experimental satellite launch. Or maybe there was a procedural error and no one notified them. Or perhaps the missile just went off its designated course. But his words aren't enough to reassure them, especially after they learn the missile has less than 18 minutes before it completely destroys the state of Chicago. Estimates show that more than 9 million people could die. Olivia immediately makes video calls to all military leaders, updating them with all the details she has. The strange thing is, not one of them has any information about the missile's source. Everything said is just speculation, nothing more. Olivia and her colleagues are forced to make calls on a global scale just to find out the source of the launch. The Russian government denies any responsibility for the launch, so they guess it might be coming from China or North Korea, or that their enemies in the Middle East, like Iran and Pakistan, are behind the attack. But they are shocked to find no information confirming any specific country's involvement. At this moment, a state of emergency is declared everywhere in America. They activate the evacuation plan for all important officials in the White House and the Department of Defense headquarters. Amidst all this, we notice Olivia is extremely tense, not just because of the missile, but because her son is sick and at the doctor's.
She calls her husband to check on her son. Her husband worries when he notices her tense voice, but Olivia refuses to tell him anything about what's happening. She reassures him and ends the call. But afterward, tears stream down her face against her will. She knows that the U.S. government's response in these situations will be nuclear deterrence, which means America will face retaliatory nuclear attacks. Olivia is scared for her husband and son, but she quickly regains her composure and gets back to work. There's no time. Less than 8 minutes remain before the missile hits Chicago. At this moment, we see the missile platforms in the battalion open up and 2 missiles are launched to intercept the unknown missile. Everyone watches the screens with great fear and anxiety. They are shocked when they learn the first interceptor missile failed to hit the target because the missile is moving at great speed. Olivia tries to reassure her colleague Davis, telling him the second missile will hit the target. But the second missile explodes far away from the intercontinental ballistic missile. Here, everyone breaks down. They are devastated by what happened. That's it. There's no escaping the missile hitting the state of Chicago. We see tears in the eyes of the battalion soldiers who are sitting in their places waiting for the disaster to happen. Daniel even leaves the battalion headquarters and goes outside because he can't control his emotions. At the same time, we see the U.S. presidential spokeswoman at a press conference. She tells the journalists that there is no confirmed information about the potential threats and informs them that the president is in a secure location. Suddenly, special forces spread throughout the place. The president's secretary asks one of them what's happening, and he advises her to flee the area quickly. Meanwhile, we see an emergency management official named Katie. She is worried about what's happening and continues to follow the situation with intense interest. She gets upset when she learns there is no way to destroy the missile, and worse, no one knows who launched it. But suddenly, she learns she must be transferred to a government bunker because she's a high-importance individual. It appears Katie doesn't want to leave, but her colleague Mike reassures her, telling her this is a necessary precaution. He assures her that he will take charge of the place in her absence.
Back at the White House, Miller, Olivia's boss, is evacuated to a safe location. Miller tasks Olivia with monitoring the situation. Although Olivia is nervous and feels this is a huge responsibility, she has no choice but to agree. Afterward, Olivia starts communicating with senior White House officials, updating them with details as they come. At this time, her colleague Davis looks anxious and tense. He leaves the office, holds his phone, and looks at pictures of his family, as if he's saying goodbye. We go to the U.S. Army Central Command Operations Headquarters. We learn this headquarters is the Nuclear Missile Launch Center. General Anthony arrives, learns the latest developments, and immediately orders the launch of an interceptor missile, hoping this missile can destroy the one in the air before it reaches Chicago. By doing this, Anthony is trying to avoid using any nuclear weapons. While activating the launch order, Anthony contacts the Secretary of Defense personally. The secretary is shocked to learn that Chicago is under nuclear attack. Why? Because his daughter, Caroline, lives there. Then Anthony calls the Deputy National Security Advisor, Jake. As soon as Jake learns what's happening, he rushes to the secure bunker. There, he asks his colleagues to gather as much information as possible from various intelligence agencies. But they find it difficult to do so, and this procedure will take a long time. So, Jake decides to contact a high-level Russian official and asks if they have any connection to the missile. The Russian official confirms they have nothing to do with the missile and threatens a swift response if Russian territories are targeted. Jake is confused and tense because he doesn't agree with launching a nuclear missile, and he doesn't even know who launched the missile in the first place. He calls the North Korea affairs expert at the National Security Agency, Anna. She informs him there's a possibility North Korea launched the missile, but this is unconfirmed. She tells him many countries have nuclear submarines deployed everywhere in the Pacific Ocean, and all these submarines are loaded with nuclear warheads. Despite all this, Jake remains adamant about not using nuclear missiles for deterrence because the resulting risks would be enormous. But he discovers there are malfunctions in satellite communications, making it difficult to identify who is responsible for launching the missile. Here, Jake understands they are under a cyber attack. This attack has breached the communications network, including the satellites. Therefore, he understands that a major enemy state is behind this attack. At this moment, the last interceptor missile fails to hit the target. Here, Anthony calls the U.S. president personally. The president's image isn't clear during the call, and he has a recognized code name, POTUS. Anthony requests permission from the president to strike all targets that might be involved before those countries can launch other strikes. He informs them they have already identified all these targets, and all that's left is the confirmation to launch the nuclear missiles. Anthony believes they have already lost the state of Chicago, even though they still have 4 minutes before the missile explodes. But the president rejects Anthony's words. He asks him to identify only the party responsible for the missile, because if he gives the order, it will cause an all-out nuclear war. Anthony gets upset with the president's words, so much so that he gets up from his seat and refuses to continue the call. But then Jake contacts Anthony and informs him that the Russians are worried about U.S. submarine movements in the Pacific. Not only that, but they also detected stealth aircraft flying near their airspace. Consequently, they also moved their nuclear submarines toward the U.S. coasts. Jake says he agreed with the Russian Prime Minister to withdraw the submarines that approached America, which proves their words are true and they have nothing to do with the missile. In return, the Russian Prime Minister asked them not to violate their airspace and not to carry out any nuclear strikes near their land. At that point, Jake asks Anthony for his final decision. At this moment, only 2 minutes are left before the missile explodes. Here,
Anthony has issued orders to prepare for the use of nuclear warheads. We see the submarine commander pressing the readiness button and then reporting that he is awaiting the missile launch codes.
Anthony starts explaining to the US president that if they don't carry out the nuclear strike, their position before the whole world will be weak. He tells him this will be considered a declaration of America's surrender to its enemies everywhere in the world. Anthony says that whoever carried out this attack cannot go unpunished. He advises him to activate the nuclear missile launch codes, as he is the only one with the authority to do so. Anthony finishes his speech and asks the US president for his final decision.
The US president asks him for time, 1 minute.
Here we go back in time before the missile was discovered. We see the US president attending an important sporting event. As soon as the Secret Service learns that a missile is heading toward US territory, the president is immediately extracted from the location. The presidential motorcade moves at top speed until they reach the airport. There, the US president boards the presidential plane and flies into the air. He continues to follow what's happening with Anthony and Jake. At the same time, the US Secretary of Defense is in his office, trying to call his daughter who lives in Chicago. He refuses to leave with the Secret Service before talking to her. Unfortunately, when he calls her, she refuses to talk to him. We learn his daughter has been estranged from him for a while and lives alone. The Secretary of Defense is saddened by his daughter's behavior toward him, and he decides to end his life. He throws himself from the top of the building before boarding the plane.
We return to the US president, calling his wife to check on her. It appears the president's wife is on a trip in the forests of Africa. It's clear the US president is very tense and is trying to talk to his wife to calm his nerves before making his final decision.
After ending the call, he talks to the officer responsible for the nuclear briefcase, which contains the missile launch device. The officer says they have only two choices: either surrender to the reality of the situation, and whoever carried out this operation goes unpunished, or they launch nuclear missiles at all their enemies everywhere in the world, which would be the best response to the bombing of Chicago.
Here, the US president makes his decision. He pulls the launch codes from his pocket and dictates them to the officer. Of course, this means that all of America's enemies who will be hit by these nuclear missiles will also retaliate when they are hit. This means it's going to be a nuclear war that will wipe out the planet.
In that same moment, as the world is ending, we see high-level officials sprinting to hide in bunkers. And on that terrifying image, the film ends.